7:03. I'm calling the meeting to order. I have several adds to the agenda, and I have revised agenda up here with some chicken scratch on it with my adds. I have added communications onto the clerk's report. I have added under unfinished business an item D for a budget meeting discussion and approval of the annual report, so that can go to the printers. I have also added under new business item J, which is scheduling for our 6/19 and 6/18 meetings. I'd like to discuss combining them into one night and saving some fossil fuels, as well as I am passing around a calendar. If people could fill out when they are not available, so that if I have board members that are not available and we can't get a quorum potentially, that we know that going into scheduling for the summer. And we'd also like to do a board retreat. So, and I don't want that to be on camera if you're going to be out of town, so I'd rather have that just come to me quietly. And so that is my first item of business, and I'm completed with that. Yes, Ms. And could you please state your name and your
Yes,
town?
Dodie Normandoe from Dummerston, and it's very difficult in this room to hear. And I know there's some very quiet voices, and even usually I can hear yours, but yours is still quiet to me. So if you could all speak up, seeing as there's not a mic, that would be appreciated. Thanks.
Okay, well, try not to yell at you like I sometimes do.
No, you go right ahead and yell at me. So that way I can hear.
So, thank you, Tim, for those minutes. Moving on to the clerk's report. Thank you for those minutes, Tim. You are an incredible note taker. I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes of May 22nd.
So moved.
Thank you, David. Second?
Second.
Thank you, Tim. Any discussion?
I do have a couple things. Barb asked that I make a couple changes to it. She wanted me to add all of the information about the vote. So I took all of that off BCTV, and while I was at that, I grabbed all of the discussion around that.
Okay.
And then also, I noticed after I sent it to Barb that I had said that Lyle and Frank are board officers when I think they're district officers. So I changed that too.
Thank you for getting that off BCTV, because nobody took minutes until we had a clerk, so that's a challenge. I also noticed one little typo. It said that Frank longs for public education, and I think the comment was Frank loves public education.
Well, maybe both.
It may be both, but I do recollect the minutes should be a reflection of the business that occurred, so that could be misunderstood, that he feels we don't have public education. Any other changes to the minutes? All those in favor of approving the minutes of May 22nd, please signify by saying, sorry. Emily is attending via phone. So we will have to do roll votes in order that Emily participates by statute. So Tim, for approval of the minutes, how do you vote?
Aye.
Kelly?
Aye.
Emily?
Aye.
David?
Aye.
Sean?
Aye.
I vote aye as well. The motion passes unanimously. Communications, one of our ads. Does anybody have any communications that have not been circulated? I had one from a parent inquiring about childcare for the June 25th budget meeting. And when we talk about budget meeting, I'll follow up with that, but we're moving forward with that. I have in your packet included a communication from Sue Siglowski at she's an attorney with the VSBA about how policies get approved, because right now we don't have any policies because we never existed before. And so we have to warn policies, such as I put the conflict of interest policy on for us to do that, I realized we actually don't have a policy. So her opinion is there. The long and short of her opinion is that we have to warn a policy, and so in 10 days we can warn and pass a policy, and then we can sign our conflict of interest policy, which we will be talking about later. And I also forward an email from Joe. Can you pronounce your last name?
Oh, Mike.
Mike, sorry. Sostak. Okay, that's not how I imagined it in my head. Regarding diversity in our hiring practices and continuing that diversity conversation that we've had as individual boards. So let me know if you have not received any of those. Is that it for communications? So excellent. Moving on to unfinished business. Updates on article amendments. I just now received a response from Mark Ottinger, and I did not have a chance, like 5:30, and I was on my way here. So I've not had a chance to forward it to the board. I will after tonight's meeting, so I haven't even read it myself. But the existing articles have been sent to the attorney for his review. We are also need to, sort of as a subheading, get the amendment committee, schedule an amendment committee, subcommittee to work on the representation piece, get working on that and any other articles that we want to try to put forward.
Can you speak up and say that?
Sorry.
I have a disability, I can't hear.
Everybody move up to,
Either that or we can move towards you.
I can't help, unplug.
Oh.
Everybody move up.
That's a really good idea. That's a really good idea. Well, we should actually move there so we
I
can.
can't go on.
Yeah.
Okay.
You want my hearing it? I've got.
As a former middle school teacher, I like having you in my front row.
There, that should be better.
All right, so we're talking about the article amendments and where they stand. They were sent to the attorney, Mark Ottinger. He just got back to me. I have not forwarded that to the board, so nobody's prepared to discuss his response to us. I'd like to get working on the representation because I'd actually like to see more bodies up here to help with this heavy lift. So I'd like to, in our scheduling, talk about when the amendment committee is available to meet and start that work. Also, in response to Sean's concern about the costs of voting, Lyle did some work, and the Brattleboro recent vote was election for candidates for this board. The Brattleboro cost was $2,500, Dummerston was $250. So running an election is, something between $3,000 and $4,000. So we should be thoughtful about trying to, if we're going to have some amendments coming right up, we should really, I think, try to schedule them so it's one vote, one voter education, and one strain on the town clerks. It's not free, so. Okay, the other item added to new unfinished business is our budget meeting discussion. And I forwarded everybody, I got it this afternoon, the annual report. That is kind of like this big, and I thought we were gonna have hard copies today, except they did not arrive. So I have nothing to share with even my board members, and even this is not correct. So I only have digital copies for board members. It is the combined budgets, but I will walk through it.
Any changes though?
So a copy, so the bulk of it is, so all of this of the annual report is the combined budgets that have been approved by boards, and most of them have or will be voted on by the electorate of the district and approved. The cover sheet, that state-required document that we all love that's so clear, that has been changed because we actually know the yield. The beauty of having your budget vote on June 25th is you actually know your yield. And I think we should always do our budget vote on June 25th, so we have our yield. So it didn't change actually our per pupil costs, but these are actually good numbers that we're going to vote with, which is fun for a change for us. The yield is now been approved at $10,648, whereas there was some last minute wrangling between the House and the Senate, and they had projected $10,666. So they're out of session, it's not going to change. So that still results in a final tax rate of about $1.70. A final unified, non-CLA adjusted tax rate. After much discussion with central office, the board, the finance committee that met with the central office the other day asked that the CLAs for the individual districts be included. And so on the back of that, Frank didn't want to change that state required page because A, it's already bad enough, and B, it's state required, so you shouldn't probably mess with the page. So on the back of that page, we will have all the adjusted CLAs for the communities so that people can see that their tax bill relates to what they passed as a budget. And hopefully I can explain what a CLA means so that people can understand the differences between the districts. Added to that also is kind of the stuff we normally see, the WSESU cover page that kind of says how the comparisons between the districts, that's always been in our reports. A letter of all our personnel, that's always been in all of our town reports. A nice letter from our superintendent, that's always in our town reports, our annual reports. The warning, the minutes, which need a small amendment, and the child fine notice. And that is the annual report. The finance committee that met at 6 o'clock has gone through it. We have only one tweak, I think, and that's to the minutes, right? That we need to update. But the finance committee reviewed it, so it can go to the printer tomorrow. Any questions from anyone about the annual report? Does that sound like it includes everything that we need to have to bring to the voters? We can always bring handouts too if there's something missing, but tomorrow at 8 o'clock is our drop dead time to get it to the printers. Yes, Jody.
So this doesn't include any of the possible changes that they're going to maybe come to the annual meeting with?
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Paul?
I know David asked the administration if they would do some searches and see if there could be any savings that would be administratively possible rather than, through programs, that kind of things for the kids. They didn't find anything?
So at one of our transitional board meetings, Ricky made the suggestion that because this is a super busy time at the SU level, at the central office level for so many reasons, and Frank has a lot of things to get done to make us a legal entity. So he's going to work on that when some of that work is done, and we can bring those as amendments from the floor. Because there really wasn't time to get this printed and go through the changes as a board and him to find them at this point. So if any of those savings are identified, we'll hopefully discuss them on the 18th, and we can bring them as amendments from the floor on the 25th.
Just a added clarification, we actually had a motion at the last meeting to do that, so it's formally.
Sorry about that.
No worries, no worries.
I don't think he's a video junkie like I am.
And you guys don't talk to each other.
No, we never see each other.
Can you just state your
I'm sorry,
name?
Tara Casting from Putney. How will those be voted on if the votes can only be in monetary amounts without actually assigning it to a specific line item in the budgets?
So all that can happen is that the final amount is changed. There isn't changes made on a line item. The public can't direct that.
Okay.
I would presume that if at an annual meeting the voters have felt that something should be cut or added, that the administration, so if the budget has decreased or increased to fund or remove funding from a program, I would expect that that would be followed in most cases, but that is how the statutes require the vote to change.
Okay.
Did I do a decent job of that?
I was just thinking through in my head the whole point of the motion was to like look at specific line items in the administration, not in program changing. And if you can only vote a total amount, potentially there's the issue of it then coming out of a programming or something that somebody might have an issue with, if that makes sense. So I was just wondering in my head how that works.
I think Ricky has a really good answer. Ricky Davidson.
Yeah, Ricky Davidson from Brattleboro. The way that it works is that the floor vote would vote up or down a certain dollar amount, but discussion would be had, and then this board would work with the administration to remove those line items or add those line items based on having heard public sentiment and that kind of stuff. So as a community member, you could stand up at the annual meeting and say, I want to cut X number of dollars from the budget. And then it's up to the board and the administration to find out where that cut would come from if that passed the vote on the floor that evening. Yep.
Robin Morgan, Brattleboro. I just wanted to clarify that in these amendments that people might make, they can state the intention that they would have for where the cut would come from or money be added to, but then they're relying on the board to carry out that will. There's something binding in it, but you don't have to just say subtract $35,000. You can say from such and such program is the recommendation. It's just not legally binding. Thank you.
If you're not happy with what the board does, well, there's an election coming on. That's the tension, though. So, you know, I would assume that the board would be doing the will of the electorate if there's a clear message.
Thank you.
Any further discussion on? Oh, I'm sorry.
Something?
Yes, Emily.
So I think I heard from the audience twice now, just to clarify, so we're not making any changes to the budget that would regard programming. So I think both comments actually said, like, if there was a change to programming, we could take it out of that item, but it actually is, we're not doing that at all. We're only doing changes that I think would affect administrative, budget line items. That was what was talked about last time. We made an amendment actually to our motion to include that.
Right, that was our motion. Any further discussion? Are we ready to vote on sending the annual report to the printer? Looks like it. Tim, how do you vote? Oh, sorry, David.
Do we have a motion? Did we get the motion?
Oh, we don't have a motion, you're right. I would entertain a motion to send the annual report off to the printer.
I move we send the annual report to the printer.
Thank you, Mr. Scholes. Is there a second?
Second.
Are we ready to vote? Tim? Kelly?
Aye.
Emily?
Aye.
David?
Aye.
Sean?
Yeah.
I'll make it unanimous. Aye. And the motion passes unanimously.
Is the budget available on the website?
Can you just
Not
state
yet.
that?
Well, there's something up there, the transitional decision
It is
thing.
on there.
Is it?
I looked today and I couldn't, well, not the one we looked at yesterday. That's going to be the, but anyway,
Liz Adams, from Putney, I will get back to you and send you a link to that, because I saw it maybe, and we had asked that Barb put it on the front so it would be more accessible to people, like a little bit, because you have to go down into finance and find the board, and I think it was on the transitional board for a while, so to put it someplace as people prepare to go to the annual meeting, that it was easier to find.
it says, there is a new thing that says the warning is under agenda. And then if you look at the warning, it's just the warning, the budget's
The
not.
budget isn't attached.
Not yet. Or wasn't this afternoon?
I can also send you a copy, Joe.
Christina?
Yes. Oh,
Yeah, if I can go back to B for a second, I just wanted you to know that Lyle did look into when the town clerk was available, so I have dates here.
okay. I was going to talk about that kind of under scheduling, about the vote.
All right.
But we can actually do that now. It looks like for amendments, the best times would be August 4th the week of August 4th or August 11th to schedule a vote.
Yes.
So we can consider it then, or we could consider early September. But we need to get the amendment committee sitting down and talking with the attorney before we get to that point. And we're well beyond the 30 or 40 days warning, so we can move forward with that. So I realize by statute that we have to, moving on to new business, that we have to adopt, boards are required to operate under Robert's Rules of Order, but if you want to use Robert's Rules for small boards, you actually have to have a motion and approve that. We all generally operate under Robert's Rules for small boards, and 8 people certainly qualifies for small board rules. And I forwarded everybody a copy, just an outline of Robert's Rules for small boards. Did everybody get that? I would entertain a motion that the board operate using Robert's Rules of Order for small boards.
I move that this board, the WSESD board, use Robert Rules of Order for small boards.
Thank you, Sean. I will second that. Well, I can, because we're going to probably use Robert's Rules. Any discussion? Are we ready for a vote? How do you vote, Tim?
Aye.
Emily?
Aye.
David?
Aye.
Sean?
Aye.
Aye. It's unanimous. We will adopt Robert Rules of Order for small boards. Moving on to item B, the catch-22 of conflict of interest. We are supposed to sign our code of ethics according to our policy, but we never existed before, so we don't have a policy. So as I was putting that on the agenda, I asked Barb then asked Lyle asked the VSBA attorney, which has been included in your pile today, because I thought we would have to read it 3 times, but that is actually not a statutory requirement, nor is it a policy of the WSESU that you read policies 3 times. The statute only requires us to warn a policy 10 days before adoption. So in order for us to have a conflict of interest policy, by the time we're actually operational and spending money, I would like to get that warned for a meeting of either the 18th or the 19th.
Do you need a motion for that?
So there are 2, yeah, I guess I need a motion, then we can discuss which one we use. So that would be great. I would love a motion for that, Sean. Thank you.
I would move that this board entertain, now is it to the interest code? And
Conflict
the
of,
ethics policy?
yeah, conflict of interest, because one is a
One
subset.
or the other?
No, one is a policy and then the other one's a sub part of that policy.
All right, so we could include, I would move that we entertain the idea of adopting the conflict of interest and the code of ethics policy at our next meeting, or after 10 days have passed.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, David. So for discussion, there are 2 policies being used in the WSESU, one provided by the VSBA that everybody used, and then last year Dummerston spent quite a bit of time discussing the VSBA policy and made some additions that link the pledge more closely to the policy and spell things out a little bit clearer. And in our minds, in Dummerston, in their minds, I guess, I'll speak to myself in that, it was a little beefier. So I gave everybody a copy and the slight adds have been highlighted in there. I'm happy to go either way.
Do you have copies of the other one? I have a copy of Dummerston's, but I don't have a copy.
I do.
There you go, pick this up. There you go.
There's a couple copies I can. Anybody else's?
Christine,
Yeah.
would we be required to choose one or the other at tonight's meeting, or would that be?
Well, in order to warn something, we have to have the policy
Oh, I
decided
see.
tonight. So we can take something out, add something, we can do whatever we want, but I'd like to come out with something tonight so that we have that before we're operational. Vermont does not always do
Did you
one.
send this email, Christina?
I did, I sent it right after our last meeting,
Oh, perfect.
where I asked everybody to confirm their emails, and so there were links to both documents. It's the same email that had the links to Robert's rules. Yes, Jody?
Is it possible for you to highlight the change of the differences?
So I have here, so you didn't take both copies.
Well, I have I didn't take the Dummerston one.
Right,
I
because
got
the
that.
Dummerston has the ads
Got
on
that.
it. So I just underlined and wrote add where we have the Dummerston ads.
Oh,
Additions, I guess, not ads.
Dummerston. Yeah, I'm going to, no, this is only one thing here. Add by. Add here.
So we're going to talk about this.
We're going to talk about this.
Did you abide by the consensus of the board as reflected in its official action of that change? What does that mean? I mean, if a consensus is reached,
Right.
what does abide by it mean?
It means that you don't try to, if the board has agreed, we're going to reach out to Wyndham Northeast Supervisory Union, that you wouldn't try to stop that in some way.
I see.
I'm just,
In a not public way.
right.
Yeah,
Right.
okay.
You're allowed to have your own opinion. for
And
sure.
you're allowed to express it as well.
Of course, yes.
Okay, great.
Are you kidding?
Well, it doesn't, abide probably has some legal meaning that is far beyond our comprehension, my comprehension at this point.
We had an attorney we had someone with legal training, not acting in the capacity of an attorney, work with us on this. I'm happy to change that word.
No, leave it. If that's what it means, and you just said it and now it's on film, Rick's got it, that's all there is to it.
Perhaps you've met my board.
I know a couple of them.
Yeah.
there's several wordings that are different, so, other than just the add thing, so. Just
So
wanted-
Where do you think?
Well, right, number one, act within the scope of my role. First one is recognize that board's members' responsibility. In ours, it's act only as a member of the collective board. Give no directives, I think is saying.
Well, they're in different orders sometimes, Jody, too. So act only as a member of the board and act only as a member of the collective board.
Yeah,
So,
okay.
and not assume any. So
Yeah,
they're.
you're right.
I think we tried to reorganize things to make things that are the bigger items at the top. But this is thinking a year ago, and that's, so some of the changes are, where the original VSBA says that you have to act to avoid the appearance of conflict of interest, we added that you should also avoid an actual conflict of interest, not just the appearance of it. We ask that people come prepared and attend all board meetings insofar as possible. Adhere to the norms the board establishes, and we spelled out a little more clearly open meeting law and what it entails. We'll comply with open meeting law, conduct board business, and only enter into executive session is allowed by the open meeting law, just as a reminder. And we also added promptly address any ethical concerns of or with fellow board members first with the board. So those are some of the big highlights there.
And this has been vetted by a lawyer, is that correct?
Someone with a legal background has reviewed this for us, yes.
Well, I mean, I don't see anything egregiously different or, I I mean, it seems pretty straightforward to me to use the Dummerston changes.
Would you like to make a motion to that?
Are you amending your
Sure, I
motion?
will make a motion for the WSESD board to warn the adoption of the Vermont Code of Ethics for school board members as amended by the Dummerston School Board of Ethics pledge. Except, a little slowed down. I didn't see the word pledge. I'm a little slowed down by that. So pledge means you have to do it verbally, right? I don't really like the word pledge very much.
You
What
just,
would you
it could,
like
we
to-
could just say,
Agreement?
call it the,
Yeah, agreement.
it's not gonna say pledge. on
Or,
it.
I mean, it already says what it is. It's a code of ethics
Yeah,
for school board members, so that's, and drop the word pledge. So I'm making a motion, but then I'm changing.
No, your motion is to improve this with the change that we remove the word pledge and add the words code of ethics. That
Yes,
would be your motion, I think.
yes, that is correct. Thank you, Christina.
second that.
Thank you, David, for the second.
Just a brief discussion.
Any further discussion?
Sorry.
Sorry.
Sean said warn, so I think that means it'll be posted in a number of places, but I've asked that we also have it posted on the website,
Oh, yeah.
so that not wait for the meeting, the meeting minutes, but
Right.
up there so people can look at it. Yep.
Any other discussion?
Good.
Oh, sorry, Paul. Oh, hi, Robin.
Oh, were you going to me?
Go ahead.
I was just wondering, I noticed that there is one thing under the first paragraph that seems to be eliminated from the Dummerston one. On ours, it says, the last one says, avoid making commitments that may compromise the decision-making ability of the board or administrators. Is that somewhere else on this, or was it deleted for a reason? Or did we just add that?
Jody, do you remember anything about that?
No, I don't. I think this was a multi-year process, and I think you started it before I was on the board.
Right. And this may have been added to the Vermont Code of Ethics in the meanwhile or something.
Oh.
Oh, sorry. Shall Sean further amend his motion to add that?
Yes, I would make the motion that the fourth bullet in the Vermont Code of Ethics of School Board Members is added to the one that we are going to propose to pass, and that it be avoid making comments that may compromise the decision.
I'm sorry.
Commitments that may compromise the decision-making ability of the board or administrators.
Do I have a second on Sean's amendment?
I will.
Thank you, David.
That's your voice
I
is
can
getting
do
all the way to
it.
the
Sorry.
end of the table.
Do I have a second on Sean's amendment?
Second.
Thank you, David. Yes, Paul?
I note that you refer to a conflict of interest, but there is no definition of what a conflict of interest is. Do you have a separate
The state, that's, yeah.
item
Also,
that would
financial,
define it?
material thing.
Yeah, okay.
There's like an overarching policy that says what it is, and the state has a definition of conflict of interest.
Yeah, now some of them can be very broad.
It's pretty specific here.
Yeah, I didn't know, but you do have something that refers to it?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Jody?
Well, I know that with the conflict of interest, I brought in front of the board two other policies. One was the Vermont League of Cities and Towns that I thought was much more clear and specific than the one that from the VSBA, and I think I gave you the state boards, so I don't know which one you're talking about right now.
So we pulled in, this is the VSBA one that's been used. What we're talking about right now here is the VSBA recommended one. This one, we took code of ethics from all over the state, Vermont League of Cities and Towns, and put those all together just to make sure that ours was beefed up and
But I was talking about the conflict of interest policy.
Oh, the conflict, not the code of ethics.
No,
Sorry,
but
sorry,
not
sorry.
the code of ethics, because I thought that the one that
didn't
came from
change
the
that one.
SBA was very unclear, and the Vermont League of Cities and Towns was much more clear. But that was my opinion, and I didn't know what you were working on.
We did not make that change, so I don't have a policy ready to go, and I think we're gonna have a policy committee that can work on beefing that up, and I'm sure they look forward to your input on that matter when we move forward to that statement. But I really would like to get some sort of document. We're kind of moving this forward quickly, just because I think it's really important that we get this done. It's a statutory
So
requirement.
what this is referring to is to come.
Yes, well, it exists, and then we can make changes, so. Any further discussion? Are we ready to vote on the amendments? And, so we have to vote on the amendments first. So Sean's amendment to add, this is a long roll call too. So we're first gonna vote on Sean's amendment to add avoid making commitments that may compromise the decision-making ability of the board or administrators to the Dummerston Town School Board Code of Ethics. Are you ready for a vote on the amendment? Kim?
Aye.
Kelly?
Aye.
Emily?
Aye.
David?
Aye.
Sean?
Aye.
Christina, aye. The ayes have it. The motion passes unanimously. The amendment to change the name of the policy to Dummerston Town School Board Code of Ethics from Dummerston Town School Board Ethics Pledge. It would now be the WSESD Board Code of Ethics. Are you ready for the vote? Tim?
Aye.
Kelly?
Aye.
Emily?
Aye.
David?
Aye.
Sean?
Aye.
Aye, the ayes have it, the motion passes unanimously. And now, for the original motion. I'm getting my workout tonight. Sean's original motion that we use with the amended changes, the Dummerston Town School Board Ethics Pledge, now the WSESD Board Code of Ethics. Are we ready to vote?
Aye.
Aye.
Emily?
Aye.
David?
Aye.
Sean?
Aye.
Aye, the motion passes unanimously. Whew, thank you. I also have a request from Lyle to move forward and also warn the HHB, the harassment policy, because that's a mandatory policy and our SU has not adopted it yet. And we may need that over the summer. We have employees.
Are you changing the order of the agenda? at this
I am
moment?
not, this was this added on as an add or no?
We can do it at the end.
All right, we'll do it on other business. Thank you, Sean. Okay, moving right along. I just wanted to go over some board norms and communication preferences, and stuff has been cropping up. Barb has asked if I wanted all the information that she sends to board members to funnel through me. I have no great interest in doing that unless the board sees some reason why that should happen. If there's something that's meant to go out to all of the board, I'd just like it to get there as quickly as possible and not have it buried somewhere in my spam file. So I was going to go forward and do that. There has been lots of concerns in the past, though not with this board. Things have been going well, but I just want to remind board members that directions to the SU should be done through by full board action, that we shouldn't be all calling Barb to ask her for stuff unless a committee, and I think we're going to have to suss out what happens at committee level, because there should be a little more autonomy in committees, but that we're not giving a whole pile of work to Barb and not really coordinating what the information and the work we're asking of Barb. So I just wanted to put that in. There's been no issue. Things have been going well, according to Lyle. I just wanted to throw that out there. And then I just wanted to quickly go over, in general, when I have run boards, I like to let the board weigh in initially in discussions and then kind of throw it out to the audience and make sure we get full audience participation. Then we can take that and rediscuss and keep that process going as much as possible. But also, after 3 hours, I become a blathering idiot. So keeping in mind that sometimes we have to limit conversation and the back and forth and table conversations, especially in the summer when we all have other things to do. I just wanted to see if that was a board sort of standard and policy that the board agreed with in terms of how I was operating. I see head nodding. Either you're nodding off or you're agreeing. I don't really need a motion because this isn't really a policy or anything, but just that's kind of how I envision it. If somebody has a different vision, speak up or bring it up at a later meeting.
Well, the other thing I could see, everybody, I think, uses a WSESU email, so that's going to have to be changed. And I think it's a wonderful, to have a specific email that's just school board related is nice.
Yes, we probably have to make that change, but oh boy, every time you make that change, it's something goes wrong. So, but the summer is a good time to do that when there isn't so much critical stuff going through.
Well, can we keep the WSESU for a little while beyond July 1, or do we have to change it right on July 1?
We're still part of WSESU. So
Oh,
I
true.
don't think it's a problem.
Yeah, okay.
I mean,
And there are only 8 people that it would have to change for, so it's not, well, for the
Yeah,
time being,
yeah.
so it's not that terrible a change.
Yeah.
no, it's just in my own personal email. Something always gets caught when we go through more people. So,
Okay.
so I will put that on an agenda for a future meeting when Lyle's here so that she can help with the logistics of that and figure out the best way to do that. Yes.
Yeah, just in the general, just in terms of general communications, if we could have any documents that are going to be, and obviously during this last month or so, it's not possible because well, you got the attorney's document on the way in the door, so clearly everything can't be done ahead of time. But as things smooth out a little bit, if we just, the standard practice would be that when some information arrives or if there's a document that's going to be available at the meeting, that it gets emailed to us and posted on the website so that people can see what we're getting. Because otherwise we have to bring enough copies for the audience and everybody in town.
So kind of what I have done in the past in terms of chair is like if there is something that's not really affecting business, I try to, like day-to-day business of the board, or it's just an update or something, I try to put that all together at some point versus filling people's email inboxes constantly. Or if it's just somebody's contacted me, then I'm going to do that under communications.
Yeah. Just off the, just sort of top of my head, I just looked at one example, just looked at the agenda for instance, and the thing about the next item is to determine immediate community needs and appoint committee members. If there had been a group that had been working on that, they have a report or something that we get that ahead of time,
right.
Not just be handed to us at the meeting. If it's available early, we have it early.
Right. So that's my intention, and I'd love it to go out with the agenda actually, or as I send out a draft agenda, I love to send out the materials when I have them. But they've been coming fast and furious, so I will try and do my best to, I do not like to have things dropped on me either, I appreciate that. I will try and get stuff to people.
I'm not sure that everything has to be, things like that could just directly come to us from our, they wouldn't need your approval.
Right, right. Okay, seeing no other concerned eyes or hands. Committee needs.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Sorry,
Can I
Rob.
just say one comment about the communication? Sure. It might be a little bit off the topic, but I was just wondering if the board is considering any new ways about how this information is communicated with the public. I think since this is a big change from it being delocated out of the towns into this one board, that it might be nice to put some intentionality into outreach of like letting people know what's going on. Hey everyone, we're having a meeting, and I didn't know if anyone was considering maybe having like a social media presence for the board or something like that that could really disseminate information more widely than the people who are here that are already motivated to like check the website or that are fortunate enough to already get emails about when the meetings are and where.
Funny, I just had a conversation with somebody about this today, Robin. Were you like tapped into my cell phone? I think that's a great idea, and I think we really have to put some thought into that as a board in this whole transition, communication to the public, the communications that happened as a matter of course in a 5-member board in a small community or even a mid-sized community, and going in and out of the schools, and the opportunities to communicate with administration and communicate with teachers informally is now needed to be done in a formal way. And so yes, we're going to have to put something. I'm wondering a committee for that. It's an interesting. I'm a little freaking out about the number of committees we have. That's the only reason I'm feeling a little overwhelmed as to how we do that.
I mean, one possible way, I just noticed that our town clerk for Brattleboro, Hillary Francis, has a really great, very neutral, she doesn't ever give any opinions, but she's really good at disseminating on Facebook information. And it could just be that one person on the board is appointed as like the social media person, and they create a page that's like the WSESD board that can share out, here's our next meeting, and post it on like PTO pages or, I Love Putney or whatever, places that would need to be seen by the people in the affected communities.
So let's add that to the list of possible committees or committee responsibilities, and if there's something that makes sense. I mean, I think it might make sense to roll some of these ideas together, some of these committees, because we have more committees than we have members right now. I know, you gotta just laugh, otherwise you're gonna...
You'll all be on every committee.
Well, we're going to be on more than one. We have more schools than board members too.
Yeah. So the committee ideas that I had sent out and asked for feedback, we've added communications. Lyle had reached out to some other SUs that have recently emerged, and buildings and grounds is something that got lost. I kind of think of that as part of finance. I don't know why I think of that, but we should make sure that that gets covered under somebody's committee. SU representation, amendments to the amendment committee, transportation, finance, policy, diversity, equity, and social justice committee. And I put teacher liaison because I couldn't think of a better word, but really that should be personnel, I think, committee. And school programmatic equity goals and measurement. A committee to keep track of that goal of Act 46, to keep equity between our schools, and that we're measuring and keeping an eye on it, like we had working on the study committee and then on the AGS committee, that we keep that work going and make sure that at a board level we're working on that. Any board adds to that list or thoughts?
And well, it may be happening in the amendments committee, and it may happen differently after this meeting. We talk about the policy of creating leadership councils, but I think that either under the policy or within the policy committee or somewhere else of the committee to sort of flesh out the leadership. I mean, we've got the amendment. There are a lot of step-by-steps that, and this will come up later, and we'll talk about it later, but that's one that comes to mind immediately. And the other thing is that we know generally what these things mean, but one of the things that often happens is we establish a committee and we haven't really, you're going to be the personnel committee or programmatic equity goals and measurement is, also really broad. That we take the time. One of the things in Robert's rules is that you give the committee a very clear charge or a very clear task, and to focus on. And so I think that if we agree to those, then we should probably start, not necessarily tonight, but start figuring out, okay, what really do we want this to happen here?
I kind of think that might be a great board retreat process to go through.
Yeah.
Sometime this summer, when we've got the nuts and bolts of budget passing done and the amendments sort of on their way that we are critical work, if that seems like a good plan to you, as we sort of put things, and some of these committees have to start showing up sooner versus later, like,
Right.
you know, you need SU reps in case something happens over the summer, you know, so some of these things we have to get done before July 1. What do people think about sort of putting a policy committee with an amendment to default articles? Because it's kind of similar. Oh, I'm sorry, Jody, you had.
Well, I just wondered if negotiations would fall under personnel.
Yes,
Okay. Thanks.
that's where I had it in my mind as I was trying to put all that stuff together.
Didn't want to miss anything, that's all.
I think we can eliminate, well, depending on what we do with leadership councils, we can eliminate one committee, the finance committee, because with 28 board members, it's necessary to have 6 or 7 people on the finance committee, but with 8 board members, I think it would be a lot wiser for us, certainly for the first year, maybe longer, to do all of that here. If the leadership councils lined up helping develop and bring and present each of the schools' budgets, that would be, it would be basically like an organization having departments coming in and presenting their budgets one after another, and then the board puts it all together and comes up with the complete budget.
So your idea is to have the finance committee as a committee of the board as a whole.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that?
So everybody would be on it.
Well, at the BUHS level, we definitely have a bunch of committees, and one of them is the finance committee, and we review the warrants. So I don't know how that's going to change. So I go through all the BUHS warrants once a month or twice a month. And then we meet with Frank Rucker and then go over the warrants. And then he also always has additional agenda items. So the finance, you know, if you use the model of the BUHS, it definitely has an excellent, you know, ongoing use.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know how it's going to translate, because whether a finance committee can read all the warrants for all schools or not, I mean, that's something that I wonder about. How is that going to be done? But it is a heck of a good review, and it does, if you just go through and look at all the warrants and all the amounts, it gives you sort of an overview of the finances of the whole system. So.
I have great respect for you reading all the BUHS warrants, because I read the Dummerston warrants, and that's a lot easier than the BUHS warrants.
Well, I don't go through them with fine-tooth comb, but I know Bob reads them all, Ricky reads them all, so, and Rick Mills. So between the 3 of us, you know, we pick, each one of us picks up things the other didn't say. So,
Yeah.
So
I think.
But I think maybe a discussion with Frank to see how you could have a finance committee with such a large entity. Maybe he could make it easier to observe quickly.
Mm-hmm. I'm not thinking that we're going to assign all these committees and figure it out tonight, but we need to get working on this, because we can't do everything as a whole board. I mean, that's going to be really cumbersome and exhausting to all of us. I think we do need to get some SU representatives before July 1, so I'll put that on the agenda for next time for certain, so that there's somebody available for hiring decisions, or if there's any personnel issues that comes up, that there is WSESD representation on the SU board. Is there any further discussion about committees for now? Because I'm kind of leaning towards tabling it. And we're missing Ann tonight as well, so we can have a full board discussion on the 18th and suss it out a little bit more and get our SU representatives. So I volunteer for that one, that sounds easy.
Yeah. I would just say the G, teacher liaison negotiation.
Well, personnel, yeah.
Um,
Rename
Well,
that.
personnel isn't there, but once again, at BOHS, we have something called the Teacher Curriculum Committee, and we do all the reviewing of all the 1% funds,
Right.
but whether that has to be done in this big district, or whether that task could be shifted over to the administrators.
Board has to approve the 1% of funds. So, I mean, it's.
Yeah,
the
but we talked about
recommendation.
that at the BAMS committee the other day, and Keith thought there might be a way to not have, because that's a lot of time for 8 people. And he felt as if there might be a way to do it without board involvement. Maybe you could just have board oversight. But the board wouldn't necessarily have to sign every 1% fund.
It's beyond my pay grade if that's required. David, do you?
I think it makes sense for both of those things to combine them into the leadership council responsibilities. And the leadership council would recommend them for each building.
For 1% funds.
Yeah, and probably maybe for the warrants as well. I know Kim sends us the SU warrants every month in the email, and I glance at them, but I rarely go through them because I'm more concerned about our board warrants. So clearly, we're going to have to figure out how we're going to go through the warrants because we can't not review them.
Right, right.
Yeah, that's not an option. And we also can't just hand over the decisions about 4% funds.
Yeah, it is a clear, our fiduciary responsibility is really a prime responsibility. To hand that over to leadership councils, I'm not sure how I feel about that, so, I mean.
Yeah, it may not be possible. It's just that there'll be a board member on the leadership council.
Right, that would come up from them and.
So one person wouldn't have nearly so much.
Yeah. I get your, I see your concept now, I see your vision now. Well, I think this comes through all that, but any other thoughts before yes, Ricky?
Ricky Davidson, Brattleboro. Just my suggestion would be, I know that David mentioned getting sort of descriptions or what the marching orders of each committee would be. I think it's a great idea, but I would also say keep them a little bit broad because something's going to come up that nobody foresees and you're not going to have a place to put it. So if things are a little bit broader, you may have a chance to put it. Like, for instance, not to go back to the BOHS thing all the time, but at BOHS we have a planning and policy committee so that some things can fall underneath that don't have another place to go. Do you know what I mean? Things like that. So my suggestion would be to keep things a little bit broad because if something comes up 6 months from now and you don't have a place to put it, you can have a place to put it.
Yeah, great idea. Any other thoughts, comments? Okay. Oh, sorry.
That's all right. Are you moving off of committees now?
I just recognized Mike in the public, so then I'll recognize you next. Sorry, I didn't see you raising your hand.
Okay. Are you moving off committees? Was that the plan?
I was tabling it, but I haven't
Okay.
tabled it yet.
Well, I just wanted to say, Michaela and I are here really for the Diversity, Equity, and Social Justice Committee, and so if it seems appropriate, I'm hoping that we could be a part of that committee. Obviously, we're not board members. Is that in keeping with policy?
We don't have a policy.
All right.
That's the beauty of this, and in fact, I was just discussing that about Ricky, about how, we can have what we can do to include people that have been intimately involved in previous committees, former board members on committees, especially during these first couple of years as we're finding our way, and how we could involve more people, because I like having more people and more brains and more viewpoints on deck. So that's a great suggestion. It's a similar thought I've had. The board has talked about that, so I think as we move forward in policies and committees, we need to try and do that. I think that would be helpful.
Thanks.
Emily, I'm sorry, did you have a?
Yeah, one thing is, so the amendments to the default articles is a committee that will eventually dissolve. So I liked your idea about combining that committee with the policy committee, so maybe that's one thing when we do discuss it, maybe we could alter.
So people are all writing, so I think they like your idea. And I think I like your idea as well, so, and it makes the list shorter, which makes my blood pressure go down. So I will combine those two committees as a reasonable addition. Any other thoughts? In keeping with the we need more brains on deck, one of our fabulous brains is spending his evening taking notes, and having taken many minutes, I think it really interferes with your ability to participate. And in Dummerston, when we had a lot going on, we decided to hire a note taker, so that the clerk's responsibility would be to review the notes and submit them to Barb and make sure things got onto the website in time, but not the actual time taken out of the meeting. So I added this agenda item to see if the board was willing and interested in having us hire a note taker to alleviate the clerk from the arduous job of minute taking.
Oh, you skipped down, okay.
I did?
All right. Okay.
I'm on E.
I didn't see the SU representatives. Did you table that one?
We're going to do that next meeting. I had said we're
Okay.
going to get an SU
I missed
representative
that,
before
sorry.
we.
All right.
Sean?
Yeah, we had somebody do that at the BUHS meetings. We actually, a number of individuals, and it did work out really well. That person actually did the minutes, so they were there taking notes during the meeting, and you could always refer back to the BCTV, which is a great asset. And then the person would actually write the minutes, and then the board would look it over and make corrections if there were things. So I think it's excellent. Being the clerk for the BUHS board, I find it very hard to participate and take it.
That's why Tim's so quiet.
Tim's got carpal tunnel.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard. So if we can find somebody, I think finding somebody has been a challenge.
It's tricky, yeah.
Yeah.
But David,
Yeah, we've always had a note taker. Fortunately, there's a staff person that's willing to come and sit in meetings and type for hours. I'm not sure if she'd be willing to do this as well, but we could certainly ask.
Well, there is compensation.
Yeah, absolutely, and we can compensate a little bit.
I was just going to piggyback onto what David's talking about, is that we've been lucky since my time on the board that there have been teachers who are interning for an administrative role. And so the principal intern has been the note taker. So it's really easy being the clerk on the Brattleboro Town Board, because you just get the minutes from that person and approve or edit. So if there continue to be people in the district who are interested in that type of role, that might be an appropriate person to look to for who to do it.
Well, I was just going to say, there won't be these boards to do it for, so we might be able to pick up one of those for this board.
and do you know what the historic compensation has been, Robin or David?
It's pretty decent.
I
I
think it's
don't
like
know the actual number.
in the $80 a minute, a meeting.
A minute. We're not attorneys, we don't.
So, I guess I'm looking for a motion that I ask central office to contact note takers that have historically worked and offer a salary in the range of $75 to $100 a meeting to take minutes for the WSESD.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Kelly.
Second, and then
There'll be discussion. I'm just-
Okay. I was kind of questioning the terminology, note taker, because really the person would be charged to actually write the minutes.
Right.
And I'm actually the clerk for the BUHS board, and so I worked with Barb setting up a template, as actually I went to the Putney, and a couple of the towns use a template. And it makes it much, much easier. It also makes it, you know, you can actually think, okay, in 10 years, somebody could go back and see what was done, because it's very succinct. and they're only, it's not a verbatim translation of the meeting, it's coalescing just central points, all motions, all votes, and then it's something, you know, it's like, it's not that long. So if Barb worked with the individual, whoever it is, and then the person actually did the minutes and submitted them as a draft, you know, it's great.
I just wrote it as note taker to differentiate it from being a clerk, like, so that's what we called it in Dummerston, just to make it clear that the person was there taking minutes.
Oh, I see.
And so
Yep.
that, I was just
Yep.
looking for the term, and I was just using the term that we had used in Dummerston when we had this position.
Right, right.
I will say that if you ask 8 people how they would like their minutes taken, you will get 8 different answers, and they are left because the people in the front row have particular feelings about how they would like their minutes. And so we'll have to work on that as a board as to what would be our expectation from the clerk.
Yeah. Since we've adopted Robert's rules, it says pretty much what you just said. The minutes, much depends on the kind of meeting, but for ordinary society meetings and meetings of boards, and managers and trustees, there's no object in reporting the debates. The object is mainly to record what is done by the assembly, not what is said, to enter the motions, whether they were adopted, rejected, and the number of votes on each side, and a brief summary of committee reports and things like that. And Tim's comprehensive notes were for another kind of meeting. They mentioned it in here, which sorry, I'm gonna keep you all here late, but for some meetings, it's often far more interesting to know what was said by the leading speakers than to know the routine business of what was done. But those aren't our meetings. Those are not the kind of meetings we do. Ours is regular business of the trustees. So really, that's what the meetings should convey, and they don't need to be massively long. They just need to be really accurate in terms of what was done.
You have to have the motions, who made the motions, who
Yeah.
seconded, what the votes were, where you had the meeting, what time, who attended, and the adjournment time. And then everything else is up to the debate of what your constituents want and what the board wants. And so that's where it gets somewhere in between the comprehensive list. That we can, and so we can work through that as a full board and have a discussion about what we want from the note taker. But my prime concern is to take Tim off and get his whole intellect back on the board. So, yes, Liz.
The only concern that I have is that there are people without computers or older citizens who don't use computers, they won't be able to watch BCTV, so they would have no way of knowing what really transpired. The Putney minutes used to be terrible.
Yes,
The meetings
they
were not televised. You could tell nothing from the minutes about anything. So I would urge you to keep that in mind in terms of people without computer access or people who don't have a computer or older people who don't want to use a computer, that they would have no way of knowing.
Thank you, Liz.
You're welcome.
Well, I'd like to echo Liz a little bit. And I've seen the template that Sean is talking about, and very frankly, I couldn't tell what happened at the meeting other than what votes were taken and who voted for what. You didn't even know who voted for what. But it didn't convey the sense of the meeting, which I think is one of the things that was in Robert's rules, to try to convey the sense of the meeting. So I think it's very important. I'd rather err on the side of having a little bit more elaborate minutes so that someone who didn't go to the meeting could pick it up and say, oh, what happened? You know, not what votes were taken or what decisions were made, not only that, but what was the sense of the discussion and the whole sense of the meeting. So I would err on the side of having a little bit more elaborate minutes.
Thank you, Paul.
And you know I ditto that. both of them.
So just for those.
Because
who
Putney's
have
minutes
not
were
had-
horrible before, they're much better now.
Some communities' minutes are more robust, probably at the behest of community in some communities, and things change over time based on input back and forth, and you try to make all the people reasonably happy. So that's, the minutes would be a reflection of
I
that.
inputted and they improved for a while, and then they just fell like a cup.
So it's a thankless job. I'm thankful to Tim, and we can sort of talk more about what we want as a board. Probably somewhere in the middle lies the sweet spot. My motion is just to find someone else to try to make everybody in this room happy with the minutes.
Are you looking for a motion on this?
Kelly made the motion,
You seconded.
and you
Oh, I'm
seconded it.
sorry.
Phew,
I got lost.
got stuff. Any further discussion on the motion? Are we ready for vote?
Aye.
Tim?
Aye.
Emily?
Aye.
David?
Aye.
Sean?
I,
Christina, aye. The motion passes unanimously. Wow, this is so fun. We're so agreeable tonight. And speaking of the great service, moving on to F, speaking of the great service that BCTV provides people who really want to know all the fun of a school board meeting, I would like to entertain a motion that we ask and fund BCTV filmings of our regularly scheduled WSESD meetings.
so moved.
Thank you, Sean. Do I have a second?
Second.
Ooh, everyone's second. Any discussion? Jody?
Is there something, such a thing as an annual compensation for BCTV rather than the each meeting price?
I have no idea.
Neither.
Might ask.
Carrie?
Carrie Amadon from Vernon. I know that the Vernon Select Board made a deal.
Uh-huh.
I don't know what the deal was, but I know instead of doing the meeting by meeting, they just said we would like to give a donation at a number of meetings. So it might be something to look into. It's been done.
Well, I think they're supposed to cover the town meetings. I'm not sure they're supposed, huh?
They have to be paid.
Yeah, but I think that they're supposed to do that. I'm not sure they have to do the school boards and the other meetings. Check it out.
I will reach.
Christina,
Yes, Emily. Yes.
is this a good time?
Yep, perfect.
So I have a question regarding, I know last meeting we had talked about what was the pricing scheme for BCTV for a meeting for both live or when you're not live? Because for some important meetings, I know like the budget informational sessions, we were thinking about doing live. So do we have a number on that?
I have not looked into that yet. I'm sorry, Emily. I will
That's okay.
do that before the next meeting. But as I went to go think about that, I realized we hadn't approved any filming by BCTV. So I just wanted to make sure we had basic filming.
So what is the motion currently?
It's, we would have BCTV filming the WSESD meetings.
And could we add explore options? Would you, who made the motion?
I did.
Would you, you can amend your motion if you don't need to. Or I can propose an amendment, but then we have to all vote on it.
Oh,
How about I could just do that as a next agenda item and put it on?
Great.
Okay. And
Yeah,
save us a roll
that's
vote?
easier.
Excellent, okay. Any further discussion on the motion? All those in favor of the motion to fund BCTV filming of regularly scheduled WSESD meetings, please signify by, please. I think by bad habit.
Getting late.
Tim?
Aye.
Kelly? Emily?
Aye.
David?
Aye.
Sean?
Aye.
Aye as well. Motion passes unanimously. I just wanted to, moving on to G, I wanted to update the board on the process for replacing Bob Tebow's vacant seat. It was posted in the paper and in various, on the website, in the town of Dummerston, that people that would be interested in serving on the board submit letters to the board, to me, the board chair, by June 13th. Thus far, we have not gotten a letter. come on, Dummerston. Those letters will then be taken to the select board. This is a temporary statute that I guess was passed. Lyle's been in conversation with William Senning as well as Donna Russo Savage, and I have looked up the policies in other districts that are unified union districts, and they all follow this. So those letters will go to the Dummerston Select Board, who will make a recommendation from the raft of interested potential members that we're going to have piling in.
Actually, I read that statute several times, and the select board basically just collects them. They don't even recommend. They just collect them and pass them on. They have no decision authority whatsoever.
They just pass it on.
They just pass them on.
Because Senning was saying that he makes a they make a recommendation.
Well, he didn't read it then, because it clearly does not say that.
Okay.
Isn't that what Lyle said she found out too?
It was what William Senning did, it's what every other district is doing. And now I can't find that statute, because when I found it, it was a temporary statute that was passed like last year or something, and so then I haven't found it again. So I will read that statute. At this point, I'm not sure the select board's going to have much choosing to do, because we're really scouring the community to find one candidate, so to serve. But if there are multiples, I don't think the select board really wants the job of combing through them anyway, to be honest with you, because I think they didn't sign up for that job. So I will look into that again myself and see if I can find out from whence that advice came, David. So I will let you know as soon as I know, but I think we probably have to consider a meeting of 3 to be a quorum in the meanwhile, just to be safe. I mean, a meeting of 4 would be a quorum, 3 would not be a quorum since we're tied. When we're a board of 8, 5 is a quorum.
Yes.
Now we're a board of, right now, I guess we're a board of 7, so 4 is a quorum.
Is that right?
Yes.
It's not positions? It's
I don't know.
bodies?
I'm going to call it that. We're not going to have a meeting if only, but in terms of open meeting warnings
I
and
always
things like
thought it
that.
was positions, but I may be wrong.
Yeah,
That would really could hamstring organizations.
that's an
It would
interesting.
make it really, I mean, like a 5-person select board, when there's 3 votes required, if you like 4 people. Well, I would be surprised, but it doesn't matter. We don't know.
Well, I think in terms of warning, I'm treating it like, in terms of open meeting law, I'm going to err on the side of caution and treat it, you know, if you're at a party and there's 4 of you, don't talk school board business. I mean,
Don't pass resolutions.
till we get that seat filled, because that's a
And
core.
we do have a new code of ethics.
Right, well, until we sign the code of ethics, do what you want. So that's where we stand on that. Now, this next item H was a request by David, potential resolution for use of reserve funds.
Yeah, and it's potential because I didn't know what my board was going to decide until last night. But we have, well, since the state board assigned us to ordered us to merge, we've had on our agenda use of our reserve fund, which is significant. It's well over $500,000. And with all the business that's transpired or had to be transpired and lots of late meetings, we didn't get to it until a month or 2 ago to actually start talking about it. And what we found is that we would have to have a town meeting to designate it for any particular use. But in the process, we had 2 so far, I think maybe 3 meetings where we had the public come and talk about it and where we talked about it as well to get information. And there were a number of different things that got talked about, and we looked pretty thoroughly at the capital plan and some of the other proposals. And we also contacted Pietro, the district's attorney, to Pietro Lynn to get his opinion about what would have to happen, and we would have to convene a town meeting. And because Brattleboro has a representative town meeting, getting 70 people to come at the end of June to talk about what to do with that reserve fund is unlikely. And if we didn't have a quorum, then we couldn't do it anyway. So it made a lot more sense for us to look at other options. And last night we had I think we spent over at least an hour and a half in conversation about what to do with it. And most of that time was spent, well, no, actually a lot of it was talking about energy upgrades and things on the capital plan that were going to happen anyway. And then most of the conversation was about our desire to support the work of the Diversity, Equity, and Social Justice Office, the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Social Justice. And after a long conversation, we voted a motion to support a motion on June 25th, a motion from the floor to add $100,000 to the budget, and to recommend that be used for the first year of support of the Diversity and Equity and Social Justice Committee, or the office, sorry, not committee. And also recognizing that there's another 400,000 or more, that we would like that to be focused. If there's an issue with resources, that we'd like to have that reserve fund focused on at least a 5-year commitment to supporting the work of that, the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Social Justice. So I wanted to let you all know and hear if you have thoughts or concerns. I didn't want to have it just come up at the annual meeting or by rumor, because it's public and as soon as the video's out, people would have about it. And I suspect that there'll be some media interest in it as well. But so anyway, that's what we did. And I'm glad to see that Mike Zosnick and Michaela are here, and Robin, who was at the meeting last night as well. You can also speak to our thinking and our decision and why we decided to do it this way.
So I don't follow every line item in the Brattleboro budget, as I will be in the future. So this was previously capital fund money or just general reserve fund? Okay.
No,
okay.
in 2007,
Okay.
we created under A of the law that has the capital funds in it, we created an education fund. And the town meeting approved it, and then they also amended it to say we could spend it, we could decide if for educational purposes, not capital, but educational purposes, we could spend it in lieu of having to borrow money. If there was something we needed to do and we didn't want to borrow money, we could use it for that. Otherwise, we had to go to town meeting and get whatever uses we.
Something you said about like resources or building needs made me think it was capital funds as well, so.
Oh, sorry.
That was just a point of clarification, it wasn't.
Or Emily, too, I think this is the first that you're hearing about this as well, so you may have some thoughts.
I just wanted to offer a little more detail that the number that David mentioned was arrived at due to a proposal written by Michaela for a 5-year plan for the WSESU Office of Diversity, Equity, and Social Justice to focus on the areas of recruiting a more diverse staff and deepening our teacher learning and our schools' culture and curriculum around the topics that the office focuses on. So it wasn't like we just were like, let's send 100,000 to that. It was based on this detailed proposal that she had given us, and then our additional wish to, as there's only 1.5 people working in these 10 schools, on that offer an additional 25,000 for the purpose of the recruiting. So that was where the figure came from. And Michaela, I don't know if you want to say anything else about the proposal.
What do I want to say about here, I can give it to you to look at. Oh yeah, I don't know what my name is right now. I'm tired. Okay. I'm Michaela, and basically, this came about because I read in the paper about surplus, and I was like, oh, I can have some ways, and the Brattleboro was looking for ways to spend the surplus, and I was like, I have some ways to spend the surplus. So I think I talked to Mike, and I typed this thing up, and then I went to the board meeting like, let me help you. But it didn't quite go that way. But people supported the idea. I mean, basically, it's about creating infrastructure. It's about investment. It's about showing what our priorities are, because I quoted Paul Gorski before, and I'll quote him now. It's saying that, like, if you want to know what people care about, you follow the money. Like, what do they spend money on? This is, I mean, basically, we've operated in the district with no budget. So we have a diversity equity committee that's of all the schools and parents and board members, the superintendent with no budget. So basically, we're like always asking for alms. And the only school that has any budget for diversity, equity, and social justice was BUHS number 6, and I had about $6,000, and to use for field trips, that was it. And this is reimagining the possibilities of what social justice education will look like if we really put a lot of resources into it, and this would benefit all students in all schools. So like if people want to go on a social justice field trip, or if a teacher wants to evaluate their curriculum or rewrite some curricular items, like we would have money for them to do that beyond just 1%, which sometimes, and I don't know how it will work when we're merged, but sometimes that fund does run out. And so there are other places to look. It's about just every child, and really thinking through that social justice is not an add-on, but it's very much runs through a schools, like restorative justice is a part of it, and every other thing that you can think of that's about equity and pulling people together. So I mean, I can go through it line by line, but it's not worth the time. You can read it, but I'm just thinking that this is a real opportunity to be courageous and to put money into our schools in a way to produce equity that, quite frankly, we've never done before. And I don't know any school district that's done it quite like this.
I'd just like to make a comment, and that would be, I was on the finance committee when Jim Kane was here. And he always had sort of a mantra about reserve funds and the reason for reserve funds. And the reserve funds are really an escrow account that belongs to the taxpayers. And very often a reserve fund, as was demonstrated this year in the BOHS budget, we took $500,000 out of the reserve fund in order to lower the taxes. So using a reserve fund for very specific reasons in the ongoing process of the financial runnings of a school is extremely important. And so I don't view them as discretionary money at all, because of what I've learned from Jim and what has been told to me by Frank also, Frank Rucker. As an example, on the finance committee with BOHS, every 2 weeks, the payroll is close to $500,000. So if you have a reserve fund, you want it to be a percentage of your total budget. And you want to maintain that as a safety. It's like money in the bank that isn't ours, it actually is a public escrow account. So I think that what you are speaking about should be a budgetary item. And I think it's a very important one to consider. But use of reserve funds in an altruistic way or in an educational way, to me, it doesn't equate to the way a reserve funds should be designated.
Emily, you had a...
Yes, so 2 questions. One is more directed to David, which is there a possibility of getting that detailed report of what funds would be used over to the other board members? Is that available?
She just passed it out.
Michaela just passed out a copy to the board members.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, I could ask Michaela could email it to you, or I don't know if you have it electronically, Robin. Yeah, certainly.
That would be great.
I think Robin's going to send it to you.
And additionally, at the annual budget, my second question is, at the annual budget meeting, when we're looking to approve this budget, we would know how much reserve funds at that point everybody is bringing into the new school district. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, with pretty close. I mean, the audits get done usually by the end of August, then we know exactly, but we would have a pretty good idea.
We kind of know pretty close.
Yeah, we know.
We have a decent idea now. I mean, the books aren't closed, but we kind of know. I think Dummerston's around $70,000, so, you know.
And it's in the budget document.
It's in the budget document. So, I mean, well, that's at the end of last year. So it's, you gotta get through this year. The budget documents are at the end of close of last year, so.
I think there are guidelines from the AOE on percentage of your total budget that should be in the reserve. So the reserve budgets should be maintained, and the reason is to, you know, to lower taxes, as we did in BOHS. The $500,000 was popped right in as a revenue to lower the taxes and lower the per pupil spending also.
So I saw Robin, then Jody, and then Mike.
I just wanted to clarify a little bit because even though the agenda item says use for reserve funds, the advice that we received from the attorney and that David alluded to before said that we actually cannot make any commitment to these reserve funds. The entire amount will just be rolled into the ownership of the merged district for them to do with that as they wish. And we have traditionally used ours the same way that you just said, Sean, to ameliorate the tax burden. So we have $300,000, I believe, that we added into the current budget that you all have in that big booklet for alleviating that. So because it turned out that we couldn't decide what to do with our reserve funds, we instead decided to recommend or support a motion from the floor at the annual meeting to increase the budget. So that's instead of assigning reserve funds. And even though it says that on the agenda item, it just turned into a different motion because of legally what was possible and not possible. But, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot. The end of my sentence was just that in the future, this would be an expenditure that I hope that the SU board would be making, since that is actually who employs this department. But we were just hoping that we could start to do some of this work in the upcoming school year instead of having to wait another following year to get started with it. So that's the only reason for making this a floor motion at the meeting instead of doing what would be asked for in future years, which is for the SU budget to include this money.
As far as the state's concerned, is the reserve funds, I know capital funds are counted against us in the budget for being over the cap. Are reserve funds also in that? I know we were told several years ago in Dummerston not to put in any capital fund in there because we were so close to the cap that would put us over.
Right, right.
A reserve fund's the same thing?
But they were not near cap.
No, but I'm saying, you know.
I actually have the answer to that, yeah.
Oh, okay, good.
If you keep money in your capital fund, if you put money in 2007 and don't spend it within 5 years, then you will be penalized for the money that's in there. You have to spend it, yeah. The reserve fund that we set up is an education reserve fund. It's paragraph A of the A and B of that law, that section of the statute. And it's for educational purposes. And there are a few things that we'll get to talk through very thoroughly at the annual meeting, but Sean, you made a few statements that are not accurate. I know that they're traditionally the way we've operated and they're widely accepted, but there are a few things. There is no standard at the Agency of Education or anywhere for towns or school districts to keep a certain percentage in the reserve fund. The League of Citizen Towns recommends 10% to towns. The Agency of Education and the VSBA haven't made any formal recommendation. Don't have a policy or a resolution on that. It's definitely not an escrow account. The education side of it, not the capital, the education side of it is for educational purposes, and it's really clear in the statute that that's the intention. And the attorney, when I talked to Pietro Lynn and mentioned or talked about how we've been using it traditionally, he was a little bit taken aback and said that he was pretty sure that the Agency of Education would look dimly upon districts using their surplus, their reserve funds, to lower their tax rates. And I'm not sure why or exactly what he meant, and that came up last night, so Lyle is going to follow up on that. Yeah, because we've been doing it forever, but I do recall that in Brattleboro, and again, this will be thoroughly fleshed out on the 25th, but in Brattleboro in 2007, we got town meeting to let us set up the education fund so we wouldn't have to come every year and say, can we take this much out of the surplus, and then can we put it into the budget as revenue. So we had to do that town meeting action, and we got that. We got permission to not have to do that. But it's, so those things are really, we're gonna have to look into that a lot more. But I think even more important than those details, particularly the lack of a real standard of any sort about what should be in a reserve fund, this is a really unusual situation and unusual circumstances. And the should doesn't work in this process. We have to do what makes sense and what's going to go over with taxpayers and what's going to protect the interests of all of our schools going forward. And we've for the last 3 years have been trying really hard to make progress in this area. And just a few weeks ago, we actually hired the Partnership for Diversity and Equity or Fairness and Equity, Fairness and Diversity.
Fairness University, yeah.
Thank you, Fairness University, to help with our our employee searches and our recruitment efforts, and we're going to continue that. And we have also, asked Lyle to feel free to use those resources until the money was gone for any other openings in any of the other towns to help diversify the workforce. But this is something that we've been wanting to do and have had difficulty making progress on. And there are a lot of conflicting issues. There are a lot of other important things that happen. There's a lot of pressure on administrators. There's a lot of pressure on teachers. And we recognized all that. We talked about that a lot last night. And this proposal, and I think the approach that Michaela is talking about, is to very gradually build an infrastructure of identifying a couple people in each building to be the leaders of this, to get training for administrators and for those people, and to gradually and generally roll it out. But also, you didn't mention, is just explicitly.
Can I just, though I had recognized Mike, and so you were answering Jody's question, and so we didn't go to Mike, so I just want to kind of.
I will,
But I also am going to make a suggestion, Mike, you're absolutely next, is that since this has been presented to us at 8:30, I appreciate you didn't have it beforehand, but it's exactly what you're asking of us. And then Dummerston has not had a whole lot of surpluses to work with. We've just finally gotten a surplus that we're passing over to the merged board that we've worked hard to attain as well. So it would be helpful if the board members when Frank is here, to sort of explain the difference between Sean's viewpoint and your viewpoint, and sort of walk us through maybe on the 18th, so board members can have a chance to digest this a little bit and have a chance to think about it and then get trained by Frank on the 18th about, where this pot is and the way that Frank can do and explain. I think that would be really a good way to do it on the 18th and create an agenda.
I don't want to hold Mike up in order to respond to that.
I can defer to the, go ahead.
Actually, this isn't even, this is on our agenda as I forget if it was potential.
Well, you asked me to
potential resolution that there would be, to talk about the resolution that we potentially would create.
Right.
This board doesn't take any action on that. We'd get to vote on it on June 25th, and we really don't have to spend any agenda time discussing it. People ask questions, so we're responding to the questions.
Well, I think it's great for a board to understand what is good, because then you're just doing a budget change, and so it's up to this board then to bring that forward. And so I think it would be great going into it.
No, it would be a motion from the floor, and this board wouldn't bring that forward. It would be just...
No, we would be the ones that would be executing it. So it's just, I'm just in the interest of having people understand and having the board understanding all the conflicting information that's happening and have a chance to read this and digest it. I think that would be really helpful to have that discussion on the 18th. I'm not making it go away, but just saying.
Yeah, I didn't really expect to do anything but notify you that we had done that and that this would be happening at the meeting.
Excellent, thank you, Dan. Sorry, Mike.
The only thing I wanted to add, I wanted to emphasize something in Michaela's proposal, which I see a little different than than education directly, and that is that part of this, as the words Michaela uses, infrastructure, unless we really change the internal way we do things in the school, even if we hire people of color, they aren't going to stay. And we have that experience already in the school, where people have come in and then left because the environment is such that they don't want to be there. So it really requires some real significant change. And that's part of what this proposal is trying to address. I'm going to use the word, and it may sound alarming, but I think that we're really, the way we're doing things right now is harmful to kids, and harmful in the sense that they don't have role models. There is hardly any people of color in administration, in teaching positions, in counseling positions, or even other staff positions. So kids don't have any of those role models, and that's not only hurting kids of color, but it's hurting all kids. And I think that's really something that, at least I suggest that the board really strongly consider. And that's prompting part of the reason we wrote a letter that hopefully you all got about hiring practices, was to say, this is really a significant problem and it needs to have really focus. So.
Can I just add one thing to that? It would be helpful also to have the possibility of an influx of resources with the new halftime position will be joining us July 1. So like those two things together, I think would be, what they say, tour de force, would be really good to have at the same time, and to really see what we can do when we have another person, even though they're part-time, a very skilled person, and some resources to do things with.
I want to thank you, Michaela, and David. Thank you for bringing it up. I think it's a terrific idea and much needed.
Thanks, Liz. Agreed. So I will put it on the agenda for the 18th. We all have this. Emily, you've gotten it from Robin digitally. We'll get that on the website. And we can discuss it a little bit more so we can just understand. I don't think it puts us over the cap. So that's what I was scrambling to look for, because I'm always looking at that. So I think that, because that would be a consideration. And the next one's a David. Discuss policy for the creation of leadership council.
Yeah. Because we're looking at August now, which isn't really that far out, but because there's been so much difficulty with merged boards, setting up all the issues around setting up leadership councils, what I did was truncate the amendment and take out a lot of the details and basically put what seems like what reads more like a policy, so that we could put a leadership council committee in place to work out some of the details that we started to flesh out, and a couple of the things that aren't here. And I took them out because we were still talking about them all. But these were things I think that were pretty broadly agreed to. So, and Emily, you can't see this, I'm sorry, but it basically is the first paragraph from the amendment about the input, about increasing community input, sharing community input. And I wanted to propose it as a policy for us to warn and then vote on, so that we have a policy in place that we're going to create these councils, and so that they get done. And we put a committee in place to support the work, so that they get created, and the load that we're going to be all having to deal with, we'll have some help with, especially with communicating with the outside world, the rest of them. I'm not calling on people.
So let me just make sure let me get some board input if there's any board. That was one of the norms I set up early, so I can't start violating. I just set it up tonight. Any board, Sean?
I think it's a really good idea, because what David, I think, is doing is setting up as a policy which means that we do not have to do it as an amendment right away.
Right.
And then I know Guilford School is very interested in having leadership councils, so they could actually go ahead and implement the formation of leadership councils. So I would say it'd be really good.
I agree. I think it's a great idea. I've also already started to hear through the ether that there's some concern at the principal's level in some schools perhaps about how, like, a little more fleshing out of this policy perhaps, a little more guidance to the principals. I think we left the amendment purposely pretty loose about how it was going to happen, to not create an amendment that couldn't be, that had a very strict interpretation that would be very hard to change, but in our policy maybe give a little more guidance perhaps. So I'm wondering if there's something we could add to this to maybe just give a little more guidance in terms of the process of, what I have heard is that there's the principals feel like, wait a minute, how do I do that? Who do I include? And so, but I guess you didn't really put that in.
I took that up.
You took that up.
Yeah, those are one of the, I had heard that response as well. So I took that specific, the designation of accepting nominations and the part about teachers selecting their own. And to put a committee together from, with representatives from the number of the schools to work out how to do those details and work that out for us. I think, yeah. I really took away a lot of it, just the bare outline, and this is the purpose, and then we would charge the committee with the work of
the committee, the subcommittee of the school.
Yeah, exactly.
Not the council.
Right.
Okay. Oh, okay. All right. Okay, now I'm with
the subcommittee that doesn't yet exist.
Okay, great. Thank you. Liz, do you have?
It came up at our board meeting. Was that last night?
2 nights ago.
I don't know what's going on. Thank you for taking out the principals out of here, because ours was very concerned about what was getting dumped on him with no guidance. And we talked about if current board members would like to be on the leadership council, that might be a good way to help make this a smoother transition. So I mean, I suppose they fall under community members, but we pretty much decided that would be a good way to smooth this process out, because that way they still have people who used to be on the board sitting on that.
I plan to warn swallow all my former board members that are not running.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Jody first and then Ted. Jody? Yeah.
David's gone back to members who will be appointed by the board, and I have an issue with that. I also am concerned about what happens with these appointments, because often, if, let's say, let's just pick a principal, for example. A principal can go and pick certain people to be on it and not be inclusive of people who really are going to be there and really want to be on there. I would be looking for a broad representation, and not just the teacher's favorite or the principal's favorite or whatever. And I do have a thing about us being appointed by the board, which I assume is this board.
That's why I took those things out, because I think if somebody needs to sit down and talk about how should the community people be chosen. And I think for Brattleboro, it's a question of, and we've got active PTOs, so I'm sure there would be people who would be happy to come forward and nominate themselves, but we want to try to get a little bit more, actually get those people to try and reach out and get a more diverse representation on those councils, because we really need a wider representation. And so the idea is to make sure that the teachers and the community members and who else is on there?
Administrator.
The administrators also, but the community
parents,
or board,
students.
Yeah, community parents or community members, that comes from the community and not from the principal or anybody else, not from the board either. I would suggest, although unless I'm on the committee, I won't be able to do this, but is that the committee figure that out. Because my thinking is that the board would, the committee would bring recommendations for how this should happen, and then and that part of that would be that these nominations the teachers will nominate their representatives, the community will nominate their representatives, the students in the high school or the career second and middle school will nominate, and your middle schools will nominate their members, and then we'll just say, yes, thank you.
Well, you may have an active PTFO, but other people do not. I mean, we've got an active one PTFO person, or maybe two. We don't have that kind of thing. And this board has no clue about what's going on in every single school. So I would, I'm all for letting the school make that decision, but, and how they want to do it, but you guys don't.
Yeah, I just think the only reason that that's there is I think if it's going to be a committee of, from the board, we have to put them in.
I didn't think it was going to be a committee of the board.
Okay.
Yes,
And
ma'am.
again, that's more of the details.
Yeah,
to be
we're getting
developed.
into the weeds. I think it might be great if you've got some spare time, because other communities are doing this, and I think they struggle with the same issue, is this board, I don't think, wants to dictate who's serving on leadership councils. We really want to bring the information up to this board, so that is the intent. So this is just the start of a policy to pass on so that we can start this process. So I think we will open, that committee should be open to hearing from committee members and hearing from the different communities about how we make that execute in a policy. So I don't want to do it tonight at 5 to 9.
But are you considering these committees of the board? I mean, that's an important thing to think about. That's what David just said.
The leadership councils are not committees of the board. That's a specific legal.
kind of what
So they
David
won't have
just
to
said.
warn the meetings or keep minutes or stuff like that?
They're not, because they're not legally committees, subcommittee. They're not doing the work of, so that's like a legal term. Like if you're a committee of the board, there's a certain thing that,
Right.
we have said that you should be warning the meetings and make them accessible to the public, but,
Yeah.
but those are things that I think we really need to hear at the committee of this board that is going to create the leadership council, and that's one of the first things we want to work on.
And I would be happy to just draw a line through that. If we decide to approve this to warrant, I'll draw a line through the members that will be appointed and let the committees work that out themselves.
But I think
I
we have
just
to come
wanted
up
to
with
take
some,
it-
yeah. I think there has to be some process so that,
Yeah, but we don't have to decide it with that, it
Yeah.
needs the process is decided, take it off. Because that's not my goal. My goal is just to get the policy, we're going to have them. And we'll figure out what they're going to be like as we go.
Tara.
Hi, Tara Casting from Putney. In our meeting, it was brought up, and I've had subsequent conversations with some other people, and one of the things that continues to come up is the expectation of what those councils or committees will actually accomplish, so that they don't become a gathering of place to not get something actually done. So when you're considering your policy, or when you're considering your committees and what that expectation looks like, making sure that that's really firmly conveyed to the larger group, so that it is known what that expectation and rules are for conduct during those meetings, and what the process looks like for reporting on what happens at those meetings, and what that responsibility is of those people who are joining those meetings is, in terms of conveying what we would like to see, or do we even have a voice? Those things are important as we move forward. So that's all I was asked and, wanted to share.
Thank you, Tara. Ricky and then
Ricky Davis in Brattleboro. I think I speak for a lot of people ever since the beginning of the study committee started, the idea of leadership councils were very positively accepted, but there was a lot of people that had, and you heard some of it here tonight, about the way it should be done and the input. And I would be concerned if I was sitting up there that the communities may believe that you're doing end run around community input on how this is put together by creating it as a policy. I understand doing it for expedience purposes and getting the principals and the schools to have leadership councils sooner rather than later, and I think that's a really good idea. But I think that the one thing that I heard from the beginning of the study committee process was leadership councils are a great idea, and the community needs to have input as to how that's created and what they're charged to do and all of the other things. And I think that if the SD board decides to do it as a policy, the community may view it as an end run, and I'm just asking you to watch your backs because that could get ugly really fast. Because the conversations that we've had since 2015 about them got ugly really fast.
Thanks, Rick. I didn't think about it. You flipped my perception on its ear. Thank you for that.
Sorry, I just thought process.
Okay.
I'm good now, I got it. He answered some of my questions.
But I mean, that is the intent, is for community input. So I just want that to be on camera. Everybody here, that was, we know we're losing that vehicle, and how can we try to replace some of that? So that is our intent. So if, however it appears, bumbling as we are through something that we've never had before in a situation that many of us did not want to be in, we're trying to do our best to try to ameliorate, I thank you for using that word, it's a good one, ameliorate that loss of community input. Yes, Robin Morgan.
I just wanted to offer a suggestion that it seems like the board is wanting community input on how to do this, so maybe a series of public meetings where they just you invite community members to come and share what they would like the councils to look like, and then you can take all those opinions under advisement when your subcommittee meets. And I would also encourage the board to think about by either inviting these people to a meeting or going and interviewing them as single committee members, but get some expert opinion from people like administrators, from Michaela, and other people that might have a perspective on here's some pitfalls or here's some important things to consider.
Thank you, Rob. I'm also wondering, since the boards are actually in existence for 6 months, if the existing board members could do some of that work, because the existing district board still exists for 6 months to finish up business, so we could maybe enlist some help from existing board members to be the conduit for that information, who know what the boards have done, know how communication happens on the ground level at schools.
I didn't know that we existed.
To finish up business, it's very undefined.
Okay.
You're mostly gone, kind of like vaporizing in and out.
Vaporizing quickly, just a little bit left over.
Like Marty McFly.
So this is just going to go to some subcommittee, and maybe on the 18th we'll talk about this, but the 18th is looking pretty full, so I will see how the 18th is looking, and I'll either schedule the 18th or their first meeting in July.
To finally decide whether to warn this, you mean?
To warn this as a resolution, if we want to, well, we don't have a subcommittee to work on it yet either.
No, I meant just, oh, I see.
So we have to create the subcommittee next meeting, and then maybe.
Oh, to create the policy councils.
Right.
Yeah.
Last item. I am wondering about the possibility of moving our 6/19 meeting that was scheduled to be in Guilford to 6/18 and combining it with our budget presentation in Dummerston, so that maybe sometimes we could actually have a night not going to a meeting. In the interest of conserving fossil fuels, and there's so much time to burn out on this board, we don't need to do it all in June. Would that be a reasonable change of schedule to move the 6/19 meeting to 6/18 and combine both meetings and have them both at Dummerston?
So the informational meeting
Goes first,
just like we did tonight.
right, and then, well, this wasn't an informational, but
Oh, but it was a budget, yeah.
budget meeting, but, so the informational meeting is the first half an hour, and then we move into a board meeting. So done, the change is made. I have also sent around a piece of paper for people's availability, so if you can get that back to me. Emily, I will email you, I'll email Anne, because I hope to schedule a board retreat to kind of work on some of these visioning issues. So a daytime, so if you're absolutely not available during the week, I'll then go to the administration with possible times and continuing the iterative process of scheduling. And also looking to schedule meetings in July. Okay.
Is the rest of the meeting going to be all scheduled, Christine?
There's just the HHB policy under other business. We're talking about warning the harassment and bullying policy from the SU. As far as I know, I don't expect anything crazy to happen.
Thank you.
Because we're scheduled through the end of June, I would presume that the first week of July is probably not a great week to meet.
The first two aren't.
It's the first.
I guess we'll just fill that out for me.
Yeah, I don't have a good representation here. Is it possible to schedule a meeting for the week of the 15th of July? Are people available?
I know I'm in Italy at some point in July, but I don't know when.
Okay, so you're gonna get back to me, so maybe I'll wait until the next meeting to do any July scheduling. I just sort of wanted to start penciling
But you
it in.
might try a doodle thing to,
Right, I can do that for this, okay.
yeah, because
Okay.
if we try and do it again, it's easier to just the person.
And then the last item of business is, Lyle had asked if we could potentially warn the harassment and bullying policy that the SU has been working on, so that we could have that mandatory policy, which we are behind the 8 ball, that we could warn that for the 18th and adopt that as well. Is there a motion to warn the existing WSSU HHB policy? It is available under the policies warned on the SU website. Is there a, thank you, Sean, thank you, Tim, for a second. Any discussion?
Did we adopt the Robert's
We're
rule?
one, what?
Did we adopt the Bob's rules? The
We
small
did.
boards, we don't need seconds.
I know, but I like
Okay,
seconds.
okay, fine, just, yeah.
I like seconds, because then you know somebody else wants to talk about it.
Reluctant vote, sorry.
That's true, it's a good point, I can just steamroll through it, thank you, David. Any further discussion on warning the HHB policy for the 18th? We're ready for a vote? Tim?
Aye.
Kelly? Emily?
Aye.
David?
Aye.
Sean?
Aye.
Christina, aye, makes it unanimous. Wow, we are very
Once again.
cohesive.
We have unanimous.
Sure. Michaela, any other business before the board that I've missed? Any other comments from the public?
It's just, can I request that if, on the 18th, if you're gonna discuss the proposal, just in case there are questions, I can be there, but could you make it earlier on the agenda instead of later on the
Yes.
agenda? Is that a possibility? Because I have really small children and I'm,
I always do that stuff.
okay, that's my only request.
At this point, I welcome the opportunity to engage the community in the conversation, but I want to point out that it's really not something that we need to make a decision on.
Okay, so, whatever. All right, y'all.
I try to get people, if they're here for the duration, then fine, but if you want to get home, I try to put people early, so I will do that. Thank you for giving me the heads up. It's easier now before I get the agenda to Barb. Thank you, Michaela.
All right, thank you.
Is there any other business before the board? I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Oh, really? I move that we adjourn. At 9:06. The second. All those in favor, adjourning, please say, oh no. Tim? Tim?
Aye.
Kelly? Emily?
Aye.
David?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Unanimous, Christina, aye. We are adjourned.
Thanks, Emily. This was